Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe. I'm very excited to welcome Alonso Duralde to the podcast today to talk about one of my favorite films of all time, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, released 50 years ago in June of 1971. How are we doing, Alonso?
Well, every time I'm on the show, I just feel more exceptionally old. But I think that's kind of the point of the show, right? For anybody who remembers these movies the first time around. No, I'm great, and I'm thrilled to be here to talk about this because, you know, uh, fancy film critic that I am, I have probably seen Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory more times than any other film ever made.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I frankly would have been offended if you'd done this show without.
You would have written me a nasty email like,
How
Brian, how
dare you?
dare you? So I believe you told me we talked last time that this was the first film you saw in a theater. Is that
It
correct?
was. It
So
was.
take
It was.
so what do you remember from that experience? Anything at all?
Yeah, I was 4 years old. My oldest sister, Maria, and her, then, like, high school boyfriend guy she was hanging out with, took me to see it. It's the first I'm sure I probably went to some Disney movies before this, but this is sort of the first kind of movie-going experience that I remember. I remember being kind of freaked out by certain parts of it, but for the most part, just being totally down for it. Like, it just was it is a movie that is really kind of full of wonder in a lot of ways, and I think it still holds up for that reason. As much as there are aspects of it that are dated, and there are times where you can tell they're trying to sort of temper the magical qualities with some sort of grim industrial reality in the background.
Mm-hmm.
I just think this movie is so, it's just visually exciting, and I love the music, and I think it's got so many wonderful comedic kind of character performances. I think structurally it's really bold in a lot of ways, the way it
Mm-hmm.
just sort of like resorts to this sort of sketch humor to kind of like paint the world, with characters that we're never going to see again. Yeah, I just think this movie's brilliant.
Yeah, I've loved this movie ever since I was a little kid. I knew early on, like 6, 7, 8 years old, I'm like, okay, this one's really special because when we're young, I feel like we're
Yeah,
fed those kind of G-rated movies that have
sure.
nothing kind of dark or subversive about them at all. And then you see this one and you're like, there's something a little off in this one that I really enjoy. And
I
yeah.
No, no, I don't want to interrupt, but years later, Stan Margulies is the producer of this film, and his son
Mhm.
Ed was my editor at Movie Line magazine back in the '90s, and was kind of a mentor to me. Like, I was, not long out of college and broke. He would take me to lunch a lot, And one time he asked me, "What's the first movie that I remember seeing in the theater?" I said, "Well, weirdly enough, it's Willy Wonka, the Chocolate Factory." And he goes, "Oh God, you never had a chance."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think if you see it early enough, it just kind of sticks with you your whole life. And I feel like this is one of the children's films that you can watch as an adult and it's still just
Oh,
as fun and
yeah.
just as exciting and entertaining as it is when you're a kid.
Well, I kind of went through two phases of this because, like, I saw it in the theater, and then it would pop up on TV a lot when I
Mhm.
was a kid. A lot of times you find out later that movies that didn't do all that well in the box office, like, sold to television really cheap, and so that's why they were always on. So, like, I remember, like, at holidays, it would always, like, at Thanksgiving or Christmas, it would be on TV, and then I kind of like put it in the back of my mind. And then in college, for some reason or other, we like rented the VHS, and it was just like, it's like when you watch the '60s Batman TV series as a kid and you take it completely at face value, and then you're a little older and like, oh God, this is hilarious. I didn't realize how freaking dark this movie was until I saw it again in college. I was like, oh, this thing is insane. I can't believe they like showed this to children. And we became just re-obsessed with it. And ever since then, it's a movie that I go back and revisit all the time.
Yeah, I always assumed it was a box office hit, and it was not. I talked
No.
to Julie Don Cole a few
Yes,
weeks ago. Yes,
congratulations.
it was very exciting to talk to Veruca Salt herself for
Wow.
about an hour, and she gave me all sorts of cool little tidbits about the film and some stuff I knew, some stuff I didn't. One of the things she revealed to me was that nobody really came up to her about this movie until the 90s. Like there was like
Wow.
20 years where she didn't really get a lot of fans. And then now it's like even in her 60s now, she gets approached about it all the time.
That's so funny. Well, yeah, I mean, I did a Q&A a few years back for Outfest with Leslie Ann Warren for the
Oh.
anniversary of, I think, Victor Victoria, and she said, like, anybody who comes up to me and they're in their 20s, they want to talk about Clue. and that
including
movie
me.
and that movie totally bombed when it came out. So it's like there's this weird thing about, like, I think that when we talk about the definition of what a cult film is, and it's a term that gets misused, I think, greatly now, but generally speaking, a cult film was too weird to appeal to a mass audience on first blush, but over the years finds its people. And
Mhm.
also, I think the world catches up to the movie in a way. And so I think the world has caught up with Willy Wonka in a way. And I think also those of us who caught it on TV or in the theater or whatever, like grew up with it, and it became part of our world, so it didn't seem like such a weird outlier that it is if you're coming to it in a different way. And so eventually the weird outliers just become part of society, because the people who grew up with them and just assume that movies like this always existed, kind of take it out into the world.
Yep, Clue is another one. I just assumed that was also successful, and it was not.
Mm-mm.
I went to a gym in 2007. I was living in LA, and Leslie Ann Warren was working out, and I
Oh wow.
literally, and I usually would never do this, but I would literally like stop whatever exercise she was doing. I was like, I need to tell you, Clue is amazing. And she was kind of doing that. Yeah, I've heard that before.
You were one of those 20 something.
Can I finish my workout, please?
Yeah, I mean, like, Willy Wonka not only was a bust for Paramount, but it was a bust for Quaker Oats. Like they had this big grandiose plan of like launching these Wonka themed candies, and those didn't sell either.
I love that story on the DVD, the behind the scenes, where they're like, the movie was made to sell the candy.
Yeah. And the candy was good. Like as a kid, I remember really loving the Oompa Loompas, which were like they were like half M&M and half Reese's Pieces. So
Okay.
it was chocolate and peanut butter with a candy shell, and I thought those were great. Like those are to this day one of my favorite candies, and I'm still waiting for somebody to either rip off the concept or just revive the Oompa Loompa.
Yeah. And then Leslie Brickus was one of
Yep.
the two, right? To put
Brickus
together.
Brickus and Newley, who were a
Mhm.
very famous songwriting team at that point, they had done "Stop the World, I Want to Get Off" and "The Roar of the
Mhm.
Grease Paint, the Smell of the Crowd." They had composed several James Bond themes.
Nice.
I just learned yesterday watching Cruella that
Oh,
they wrote the song "Feeling Good." That Nina Simone song that everybody puts in movies now. That dun na 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 na
oh,
na na
right.
na.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's from Roar of the Grease Paint, Smell of the Crowd. And so yeah, they had worked they like uh Sammy Davis Jr. had done their shows, had done
Mhm.
like Roar of the Grease Paint, and sang a lot of their stuff in as part of his like nightclub act, and in fact wanted to play the Candyman
Mhm.
in this movie, and they were like, no. We cannot bring people into this world and have it seem the idea, and we'll get into this, but like the director's idea was that the world is going to be realistic, and then they
Mhm.
go into the factory and the factory is
Mhm.
bananas. But if we throw in Sammy Davis Jr. in the first scene, the world is shot. We're already in
Exactly.
cloud cuckoo land, and then that also comes out. Well, I don't want to jump ahead of it, but anyway, but they were a very big deal
Mhm.
songwriting wise, and so like them doing the music for this was pretty major. And this is an interesting period in the American musical for movies where
Mhm.
the 60s had just had so many bloated mega productions because everybody was chasing the dragon of like Mary Poppins and the Sound of Music. Those
Yep.
movies had made so much money that all the studios pumped all this money into these mega roadshow intermission la-di-da movies, and so many of them lost money. Star and Finian's Rainbow, and I mean, like just the casualties had piled up. So by this point in the culture, musicals are kind of on their way out. People are kind of sick of them, but this movie was at least trying to be like, we're not going to be a road show. We're not going to have an intermission. It's not going to be, we're not going to have Sammy Davis Jr. in it. It's going to serve the plot.
Yeah, I think something else that director Mel Stewart might have been tempted would be getting a star for Willy Wonka, like getting like a big name for that. And he went with
Yeah,
some, I mean, not to say that nobody knew who Gene Wilder was in 1971. He had been in The Producers and a
sure.
small part in Bonnie and Clyde, but he
He was
wasn't
an
like a star, right?
Yeah, he was an up and comer for
Yeah.
sure. This is like pre, the Mel Brooks. Well, he'd
Hmm.
done Producers, but pre, Young Frankenstein
Yeah.
and Blazing Saddles, both of which would come out like 2 years later.
Hmm.
Yeah, there were a lot of strategies in which he was like, we're not going to do that. Like I've Got a Golden Ticket was conceived as like a big sort of Oliver style number
Mhm.
where they were going to go out in the streets and everybody in
Oh,
Charlie
okay.
was going to be singing and dancing and I've got a golden ticket. And the director's like, nope, not doing that. It's going to be Charlie and the Grandpa and it's going to be in the house and that's it. Because everything in the world has to be the world sort of as we know it. And then when we go in the factory, all bets are off. And so he was very, very cogent about like that dividing line. And I think that's part of what makes the film not feel like one of those other. That's why this film doesn't feel like chitty chitty bang bang.
So there's so much to talk about with this movie. I thought we could kind of go through it chronologically a little bit, and then if we bounce around, we can. But I don't want to miss anything. And just the opening titles of this film are beautiful with the song playing. We get all those close-ups of like the different kinds of chocolate, and like it really gets you in the mood for the movie. And then it does not start with Charlie or Willy Wonka. We have a whole song and dance kind of thing without any of the major characters in the film.
Yeah, Roald Dahl, like, you're very conscientious, like, what do kids want to read a book about? Candy, So the movie does the same thing where it really just sort of seduces you. You're like, oh God, this all looks so
yummy.
It reminds you of like, all this stuff that you just want to stuff into your face. And then you have this great overture with like snippets of all these different songs in it. And then, they lead right into the Candyman song. And we don't know, like, is he the star of the movie? Who is this movie even about,
Yeah, and that song is still very popular, isn't it? Playing in iPhone commercials at 50 years old.
and the movie version, interestingly enough, which I think is a really shrewd move because they know what they're doing. They're marketing to me. They're trying to make me buy a purple phone with that version of this song. And then, Sammy Davis Jr. did have the hit with it. He did put it on an album and it was a radio hit. But like we're immediately launched into, we're told who Willy Wonka is before we meet him, before like it's a really, I mean, weirdly enough, it's a great piece of exposition, because it's like, all right, so this guy is clearly a big deal. He is like the king of confectioners, and we're going to sing about him without seeing him or acknowledging him directly necessarily. But it brings us right in. And then at the very end, we see Charlie like looking in from the outside. And of course, my thought is like, I don't see any money changing hands in here. So I don't know why you're not just, unless these kids subscribe to the service and they're just coming in to get stuff, like you might as well jump in and get some of those, like, strings off the wall or whatever,
Yeah, I noticed that too last night. I'm like, I don't really see a lot of coins being passed around here. He's just like, it's like a subscription service via 1971.
They paid the cover,
You get like a month to just come in, get whatever you want. But it's a lovely first shot of Charlie looking in from outside. We know within just a few seconds kind of that he's poor, that he can't afford this. He has to work just to help his mom and his 4 grandparents in a bed.
Right.
So we meet the family, and what's kind of your take on his mother and the family at home?
It's great. I mean, like they you could milk this material in a really saccharine way, like the kid looking through the window. That's so like the end of Stella Dallas, where she's watching the daughter get married through the window. But Peter Ostrum is so natural, and like it blows my mind they found this kid who's so great in this and then was like, I'm never do another one again, which is like, great, why bother, you nailed it on the first time out. But so they don't really, they're not out to milk tears with this. The grandparent thing is so absurd that you can't be like, oh, this riveting portrait of like poverty. It's like, no, it's 4 grandparents in a bed for 20 years. This is a children's storybook, so we're just going to go with this. Notably in the book, Charlie has a father. And he does not in the movie. And I think, and as has been suggested, that sort of makes Willy Wonka the surrogate father figure that he connects with over the course of the film. And I think we'll talk about the mom's number later. But I mean, I think, she's again, it's a very natural performance. And, Jack Albertson gets to be like the shticky one. The other 3 grandparents, I don't even know if they barely have dialogue.
Do they have any dialogue? Maybe a couple lines?
I made the little tassels on the end, but beyond that, not much. They could all be German for all I know, but because this was all shot in like what, Bavaria, right? I think, or
in Germany, I believe they shot the film,
or Austria. But so Jack Albertson.
He would have been great in this too.
Sure. Sure. Nowadays, put him in.
Yeah.
Jack Albertson, is very warm and very charming,
Mhm.
and he, I think, also kind of keeps those the buckets at home scenes
Mhm.
from being like too depressing. So yeah, so we're in good hands clearly from the beginning.
Yeah, this movie does not zip along by any means. I'd say the opening 30 minutes, it kind of moves slowly before we get into the actual contest. And that's partly why I love this movie. I like that there's a mystery building about Willy Wonka in the factory. We get
Mhm.
that lovely scene of him walking over, he looks through the gate,
Yeah,
and
yeah, the
that guy
tinker.
that guy comes out, he's like, nobody ever goes in, nobody ever
Mhm.
comes out. And it's kind of like uneasy. And I think if Mel Stewart had shown even just a glimpse of Willy Wonka in the first half hour, it wouldn't have the same power. I like that it takes a while to get to him.
Yeah, and the whole point is that he is a recluse, that
Mhm.
he has shut out the outside world. Yeah, one of the things that I like about this movie is that it respects children's intelligence and it
Mhm.
respects children's ability to grasp the darker elements of the world. I
Mhm.
don't think in a kid movie now you would have like the setting sun and the Wonka letters lighting up.
Mhm.
Like even Tim Burton, who is supposed to be the king of this sort of thing,
Mhm.
this sort of like hot topic goth stuff for children, like even he, I think, it hedges his bets in his movie. This one, I think, really is not afraid to sort of like, no, there are things, there is this weird guy pushing a cart with like a butcher knife hanging from a hook, and you're like, who is this guy, what's going on? They don't even explain to you what a tinker is. You need to know, or you don't know. But yeah, I think they're setting the table for this movie that's going to have moments of brightness and joy and candy and singing, and then also like shadows and creepy guys with butcher
Mhm.
knives.
Yeah, Mel Stewart on the DVD says that he did not set out to make a children's film. He set out to make a movie for adults. Like
Yeah,
that
I
was
mean,
his intention.
yeah, and that's like what all the Looney Tunes animators said too, and I
Mhm.
think that's why this stuff lasts, because it's not all like, it can be light and it can be dark.
Now I'm curious, Alonzo, on your take on this theory that the villain of the movie is
Mhm.
Grandpa Joe. I'm sure you've heard that, right?
I
Have
have
you
not.
you haven't heard that? So
Please,
there's
please
videos.
elucidate.
Yeah, so there's this video on YouTube. I want to say it's 10, 12 minutes long.
Mm.
And she just talks about every reason why Grandpa Joe is the villain, right? Is he really incapable of walking because he's in a bed for 20 years? And then
But he seems awfully
as soon
spry.
as the
Yeah.
idea that, oh, I don't have to get out of bed to work and contribute, I can go to the factory, he's dancing around the room. And the
True.
fact that
Later, he's the one that gets him in trouble.
he
Yeah, no,
gets him in trouble a couple times. I mean, it's kind of
he
tongue in
is
cheek,
at,
but
at the end. He's willing to give that
yeah,
gobstopper to Slugworth. I like this. I think this is absolutely
yeah.
valid, because frankly, I mean, my first thought is I'm sure the mom is like, oh, really? I've been boiling people's sheets for years to keep this family alive, and you're taking the old man to the factory? Great,
Yeah.
thanks. I'll be at work, I guess.
Yeah, and then we learn that he has been, getting tobacco from Charlie and the mom for many, many years.
Yes.
Like they can't even afford food and they're buying him tobacco.
Yeah, no, you're right. He is the worst.
But the actor Jack Albertson is so charming, and
Yes.
well, I've always loved that relationship between him and Charlie, because when I was young, my paternal grandfather I was really close with. We had this great relationship. My paternal grandfather actually looks like Jack Albertson a lot,
Oh
or
wow.
did. So I always it never bothered me, some of this stuff, until I like watched that long video of like pointing out every bad thing that Grandpa
But
Joe does. And I'm like, oh, okay.
on the other hand, he is very encouraging of Charlie,
Yep.
and he encourages him to dream and to imagine and to hope for something better. And and yes, Jack Albertson is super charming, and
Yeah.
and he was very sad when Shelley Winters drowns in the Poseidon Adventure. But yeah, no, you're right. He is kind of the id of this movie in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of ids going around.
So yeah, let's talk about the mom and her song, which came up on our last episode about Scrooge. What is our take on Cheer Up Charlie, Alonzo?
I really try. Like that for a long time, it was the song I skipped, or like if I was seeing it in the theater, that's when I would go to the
That's the
bathroom. Like, I don't
bathroom
need to.
break.
Yeah. And then I was like, you know what? It's Brickus and Newley. Like I've got to give this a shot. It's still pretty like it's kind of it's just sort of inconsequential. They needed a ballad, I guess. They figured, that's the one sort of slow jam in the movie, and
Yeah.
it's the one, like, if I had to cut this movie for television, that would be the first thing.
Yeah, I mean, the movie's what, about 100 minutes. It's not super long, but it
Yeah.
could have been 95, 96.
And no shade on the actress.
Yeah.
She's terrific, and she has a lovely singing voice. But yeah, Diana Sowell, who passed away recently. But yeah, it's just kind of a nothing song. But anyway, but we're skipping ahead.
Yeah, and just one more thing about that. I think the problem with that scene is that there's not really a lot going on visually. It's just showing Charlie walking, and it's like,
yeah. Okay. Although there's a one fun bit of trivia. If
Yeah.
you're paying attention while Charlie is walking down the rainy streets on his way back home, it's the one moment in the film where you can catch something in German. Like one of the lit up signs above a store, you like half see, but it has like an umlaut in it, and it's like because the rest of the movie, like they've shot it in Bavaria, Germany, Austria, wherever, but they've done a very good job at like. There's all these British English speaking actors in it. It just seems sort of like vaguely European, but you don't really know where they are. But that's the one, like if you're going to frame by frame this movie during that number, you're going to see the one clue of Germany that's snuck in.
I also think it's odd to give her that long song and then she's basically out of the movie 5 minutes later. You never see her again.
Yeah. I think maybe they felt like they needed to give the character something to do because God knows she doesn't get much like in terms of the plot and action. I'm sure structurally they needed a the hero has hit bottom and needs encouragement thing. I'm sure somewhere this is on the Joseph Campbell scale somewhere of things that have to happen. But yeah, it's just it's the weakest song in the film.
Yeah, but before that song, that's close to when Charlie ultimately finds Sigurd, right?
We're like 4 tickets in. You jumped ahead here.
Jumping ahead here, thinking about the songs at the beginning of the movie. Yeah, but before her song, we get that fantastic compilation of all the winners of the contest. So let's kind of talk about that whole sequence and maybe your favorite parts and meeting all of these characters. What's kind of your take on that part of the movie?
Yeah, I mean, again, this movie, I think like it those parts sort of straddle this thing of like the world is still realistic, but we're still going to find the comedy bits. So like when Augustus gets his, you have the reporter standing in front of the antlers on the wall, so they're sticking out of his head. You have Augustus's dad eating the top of the microphone because they got too close to his mouth. So what do you think was going to happen? The glorious awfulness of Veruca Salt, and her pushover parents and the poor women in the factory just unwrapping chocolate bars.
Make them work nights.
Exactly. Yeah. Violet Beauregard and like her dad and the used car lot, Mike TV and not until you're 12, son. Like one of the greatest one-line performances in a movie ever, and that's such an American thing. Like that whole notion of like, when you're old enough, when you're 12, you can have a firearm. Yeah. So all of that stuff is great, and then that's interspersed with the guy with the computer and the woman with the kidnapped husband, and they're literally just like, it's like almost. Like we're watching Blackout sketches, like it's just these people come on, they do their bit, and then we're off to the next thing, and but they're really funny. I mean, I Dave and I were talking about them this morning, and just that whole sequence of the woman with the kidnapped husband and the guy playing the cop, so perfectly cast. I'm sure he was on like 10,000 Mannix episodes.
Yeah.
Just the way that the sort of rich people dressing of the house in 1971 style, all they're just all perfect. We haven't even talked about the school teacher.
Just he's fantastic.
These just random goofy bits, and they're really fun to watch, and they still hold up, and they're kind of like. They kind of keep the movie afloat. It's not like they're holding all the good stuff until they get into the factory. They're already kind of peppering you with all this sort of like wacky nonsense.
Yeah, that's the part of the movie that could have been a drag, and it never is. It's just like it's like a laugh every 10, 20 seconds. And sometimes you're laughing at something and you miss the next part. And yeah, the teacher is so funny when he first learns of the contest, and he's like, class dismissed. And then he's
class
like,
undismissed.
Class undismissed.
Pass redismissed.
Yeah.
And the like stuff that kids are just not going to get. I mean, I love the news anchor saying we must tell ourselves there are many more important things, many more. I can't think of any at the moment, but there must be.
And he does it so like the way he sells that line.
Yeah.
Because in the first few bits we see with him, he's just very serious and there's nothing really that funny about him. But then he gets that part and it's just
that payoff.
like a payoff. Yeah, I think my favorite has to be the first scene with Veruca Salt. I just think that is just like I love her dad, played by Roy Kinnear. It's just so funny in the movie too, and just he will do anything for his daughter. We get to meet her mom too. She's just like knitting. She's like on the side.
Someone's going to be very unpopular around here.
But what's so great is like you really get to know these characters very clearly in their first scene. Like by the time we get to Wonka's factory, we know who these people are. And we know that Charlie's the one who probably deserves to be there more than any of the others,
Yeah, I mean, they're very much sort of like storybook characters. They all represent, like sins, might be putting it too broadly in some cases, but like flaws that that clearly are going to be course corrected and moralized about later in the movie. But that's what they existed. These kids all exist to be taken down a peg, basically.
I asked Julie Don Cole, I said, did you have to prepare to be that nasty? And she said, not at all. It was there in me, deep down, she said.
I think we've all got a little Veruca in us. Yeah. It doesn't take too much to bring it out.
Yeah. So something else the movie does really well is we find out that someone might have gotten the 5th golden ticket. And so there's this little period of the movie you're like, okay, is the story done? How is this going to work? I like that whole thing.
Absolutely. Plus the fact, who that is, the picture of the reclusive millionaire who claims to have found the 5th ticket.
No, who is it?
It's Nazi fugitive Martin Bormann.
Oh, God.
Another joke for the adults in the audience.
Yeah, so there's like this small window. I love that scene where Grandpa Joe is like, let's let him have one more nice dream. Yes. And we cut to him crying and you just feel so bad for him. And then the whole setup of like him learning that, it's a fraud, and then him going in to get the whole movie.
He goes in first, and he's got the chocolate that he just bought anyway. He was going to get one for Grandpa Joe, and then the news happens. Yeah,
I just like how there's no movie unless he finds that coin. And then, if he hadn't have found that, there's no movie.
God, I even hate to bring this up, but have you seen the Tom and Jerry Willy Wonka animated feature direct-to-video that Warner Brothers did a couple years ago?
I just heard of it looking at like Wikipedia. I was like, is there anything else except for Tim Burton's? And then I was like, what's this? Is it a short film or is it a feature film?
No. It's a feature film.
It's a feature film?
It is a feature film. Do not watch it. It is horrifying. But they basically... I haven't seen the other, like there's a Tom and Jerry Wizard of Oz and some other ones.
Okay.
But they basically turned Tom and Jerry into the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And like they kind of make certain things happen and like put the coin there. They somehow now take responsibility for all this stuff that's either happening randomly or happening backstage. It's like, stop it. No, this is not canonical.
So the Tom and Jerry movie, it's like a remake, like from beginning to end. It like goes through all the scenes and stuff. And
there's a few things missing, but they pretty much do this whole movie animated with different performers, most of the songs, but like Tom and Jerry sort of threaded through it. It's awful. But they in that one they give them the credit for putting the coin there. Basically,
gosh,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, but he shoves down that first bar, and that's not one that would have a golden ticket, right? And then he goes back in, and
we don't know. I think maybe the golden ticket might have gone into any of the Wonka products. Everybody that we. Well, the only person that we see get theirs is Veruca. Mm-hmm. It does come out of a bar, but there's nothing to say that like any thing wouldn't have one in it.
Mm-hmm. And then he goes back in. He doesn't pick out the bar. The guy just gives him one off the shelf. Yeah. So lucky pick.
Yeah, totally random.
And it's just such a magical, the way that Mel Stewart kind of frames that shot of the gold coming out and him with the big smile on his face. Like the way that's cut together is really great.
Absolutely. And I think, like we talk about the songs in this movie a lot, but like the score is really great as well. And the way that like like the flutter of like the string section and then the flute when he opens the thing. Like that's really great. And there's a lot of really terrific musical moments in this movie that aren't specifically tied to the songs, but like that's one of my favorite ones, the opening of the bar that has the golden ticket in it. It's a great moment.
Yeah, you really feel the excitement there. And then within seconds, he's crowded by people. And I'm like, okay, someone's going to grab the ticket. Like,
yes, I always think, what are you doing? Walter Scharf is the guy who did the score. I want to give him a shout out. But yeah, that as a child, that made me so nervous. It's like, what are you, run home, ball that thing up in your hand, like you're just waving it around. All these people who are taller than you are surrounding you. What are you thinking, child?
Then we get lots of scenes of him running,
yes, running.
Right. And then we meet like the quote unquote villain of the movie.
Right.
Who is like, I love the look of his face, like that scar he has. Like, it's just creepy enough.
And right? and it's such a like smash cut kind of close up where he just pivots into frame where you're like, you know. That whole subplot is done really well. Although I do always laugh at, I'll give you 10,000 of these. And those would be what?
Yeah.
And again, like, I think trying to keep it vague about where we are, we're not going to say, I'll give you 10,000 kroner or Deutschmarks or whatever. Just these,
Yeah. I think it's the part where he says, good food and, comfort for the rest of your lives for you and your family. Yeah. And Charlie's like, oh, okay, maybe that's something you might think about, But by the time he gets home, we actually, we finally get the reveal of the ticket and the family's reaction to it. And at this point, I feel like some audience members might think, oh, well, he's naturally going to bring his mom. She's the one who does all the work, right?
You'd think, right?
But no, it's Grandpa Joe. And I think, Charlie doesn't know if he can even stand up, let alone rock around, right? So doesn't he say, like, I wish you could go? I
wish I could take you. And then Gross was like, well, since you mention it.
Since you mention it, song and dance time.
Yeah, I don't see any bed sores. Let's do this.
But I love that scene. The song that I feel like I remember the most, the one that I will just randomly start belting out here and there. Not that I do that very often.
No.
I've Got a Golden Ticket is such a great song. And I like that it's not dancing down the street. I like that it's contained in the house. I think that works.
Absolutely. And frankly, I even like the fact that Peter Ostrum isn't that great a singer. because it becomes this sort of like I can't even compare this to something like Umbrellas of Cherbourg because they dubbed over like, Catherine Deneuve with another singer, but it gives it this moment of naturalism of like, yeah, this kid is caught up in the moment and he's singing the song and he's got an untrained kid voice. And he doesn't hit every note, but the joy is there and that's what matters.
Yeah. Grandpa Joe, I feel like sings more of the song by himself, and then Charlie will join in here and there. But yeah, you're right. It's not great singing, but that's okay. In
the moment it works. It just kind of feels like, again, the movie sort of leaning toward naturalism in the pre-factory sequences, and so rather than casting this like I'm a shiny Broadway kid, they got this genuine, legit child who could be a genuine, legit child in this movie. And if that means his singing is, not as razzle dazzle vaudeville ready as Jack Albertson's, it's fine. Who cares?
So then I believe it's the next scene, right? We go straight to the factory and them waiting. Is there anything else we've left out before they go to the factory?
They go right to the whole thing is, like the mom's going to get them ready. He tells grandpa about having encountered Slugworth, and then bam, we're at the march.
Yeah, and the mom says, "Oh, it's October 1st. That's tomorrow."
Yeah,
like, whoa, good thing he got the. What if he got the bar like 3 days later? I guess
exactly, right? That would have been.
So October 1st. Julie Dawn Cole said her first day on the movie was the scene where they go in and meet, Gene Wilder and Willy Wonka. That was day one for the kids, at least.
It was probably her only exterior, right? Because everything else would have been either at the factory, at her father's nut processing place, or the factory. So that was probably the one time most of those kids, except for Violet, were outside.
You're right. Yeah. So the film was shot in 1970 between, I believe, August and November of 1970. So this would have been earlier in the shoot. And this is the iconic scene where we meet Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka. What's your take on this scene in the movie?
This is, one of the all-time greats, and I'm sure Wilder talked about the notion of, he goes, he didn't want to play this character where he was like winking at the audience and letting them know that he knew that he was putting one over on these characters, but you and I, the audience, we know what's going on. He was out to like live in the con basically.
Mhm.
And so he wanted his opening appearance, and I think this was maybe one of his insistences on like in taking the role. It's like, but I want
He
to do
would
this.
not do the movie if they
Yeah,
didn't let him do this. Yeah.
which I think is genius. The idea of like, I'm going to establish right away that you cannot trust this guy, and that
Yeah.
that he is doing one thing and saying something else, or something else is true. And so it is a perfect introduction to this guy who is a trickster
Mhm.
basically, and who is not to be relied upon. And yeah, it's I think a lot of times, actors' ideas about what a character should do or whatever, like sometimes you kind of roll your eyes at them, but like I think he absolutely got it, and he got what he needed to be doing to launch who this guy was going to be for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. His entrance is so iconic. I love like just the little grin on his face once he stands back up. He does the
Mhm.
somersault. And I've always wondered when they open the gates and the kids are coming in. I think they have some security there, but I'm like, how do they prevent like 1,000 kids just rushing in?
I think there's like some sort of stanchions or whatever set up. By the way, kudos to the unnamed background kid who kind of like loses the smile when he sees Wonka limping and then is like delighted. Like that is so much channeling, I think, what a lot of kids are thinking in that moment. And I think weirdly now people would look at this moment as ableist, but I think
Mm,
when you're a little kid, you don't always process that like
mhm.
sometimes people have limps, or they, whatever it is, they're bald, any kind of thing like that is a little unusual. And so I think there's, through the face of that kid, I think he's, a lot of kids in the audience like, oh, I thought Wonka would be different than this. Oh, okay. Ha, you got me.
Yeah, exactly. So there were other people considered for the role. I think Joel Grey was one of
Oh,
like
I
the
could see
top
that.
contenders, which I could
Sure.
always kind of see that. And Peter Sellers wanted to play the role, but I'm not sure if he was ever considered by Mel Stewart.
Yeah.
The story goes that Gene Wilder came in and did not say a word. Like Mel Stewart looked at him and said, "That's the guy." Like, he didn't even
I
have to
mean,
like audition or do a reading or anything.
the face and the hair and the physical, like it's
His
all
hair.
it's one of those things where you find out, historically speaking, who else was in contention. Like, how, who else could play this role? I mean, like Joel Grey, okay, maybe. I think that period, like this would have been a year or two before Cabaret,
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
absolutely could have pulled this off. But yeah, Wilder just, it's just an indelible performance.
Yeah, and Fred Astaire, I guess, was considered too. But I feel like I
Oh,
don't know. Maybe that I don't think that would have been the right age, like the right time for him. I don't know.
that, and I think he couldn't have really done the darkness of
Yeah,
this, like there's, yeah, like even when Fred Astaire plays like a con artist in the Towering Inferno, he's going to reform by the end of the movie. But like, I don't think he could have really. There's nothing diabolical about Fred Astaire, and there is something absolutely diabolical about Gene Wilder that makes this work.
yeah. So yeah. So what is your take on Gene Wilder in this movie? What does he do so well as this character?
I, I can't even put into words half the time. He is operating in a sphere of his own. He is, I mean, he is, nobody deflects like Gene Wilder in this movie. People try to ask him direct questions, and he's just like off on something else. There are entire websites that are devoted to all of the literary references of everything that comes out of his mouth. To the in springtime, the only pretty ring time, like all that stuff. It's from something, the a little nonsense now and then, all of these non sequiturs that he's doing. And it's great because not only is he deflecting from the characters in the movie, but he's also putting off the audience. We're like, what is this guy? Is he genuinely a lunatic? And are all of these people going to die?
Yeah.
Because like, we just don't, he is, it's like, it's not even an unreliable narrator. He's like an unreliable tour guide. Like, I don't even know, but it is, but it's never excessively manic. It's
Hmm.
just eccentric and never, he's never, anytime he's going to go from point A to point E, it's going to be via X, Q, and 7. And it's just an amazing performance.
Yeah, I think the only moment of excessive mania might be the tunnel scene, but we'll get to that in a moment.
Yes, but I think it's called for.
Yeah, it's fantastic. No, in a great way. That's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, he never wastes a moment in this. Like even just like a throwaway line, he'll do it in the Gene Wilder way, and it's always really funny. And yeah, you're not quite sure like, are these kids actually dying? Is this all for show? Like it's the way it's just, you never quite know. And I love that about it.
Yeah, he's constantly pulling the rug out from under you, and just like, and even in repeated viewings, I'm kind of thinking like, is he, like, when he takes him into the inventing room, is any of that an actual thing? And he's just like messing with these people? Like, what's even happening in this factory?
Yeah, because if you really think about it, you're like, there's no way that he would allow people in here. Like it's like
Right.
the chocolate river cannot be touched by human hands, and like naturally he just lets them roam. Of course, one of them's gonna drink from it. Like
Sure,
I mean,
yeah.
So,
Exactly. Is any of this even really the factory? Is it all just like one elaborate jigsaw trap?
yeah, something he built over a few years just for this. Like,
Yes.
the factory's over there.
Willy Wonka wants to play a game.
So he takes them in. They have to sign that.
The contract that just shrinks into completely unreadable tiny verbiage.
He's like, well, if they don't sign it, they have to leave. And the kids are like, okay. So at the very bottom, it says, we are not liable for your death.
Exactly. And after this is the hands in the cloakroom, which is right out of Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast.
Oh right, yeah, that's right.
So you're already like, what's going on?
I love Albertson's face when they take the hat.
Yes, that's a perfect little
Sometimes
moment.
It's not even a line. Sometimes it's like a look by someone, like makes me laugh.
Yeah, because like people like Albertson and like Roy Kinnear, Dodo Denny, like these are old pros, and they're never not sticking it up a bit, and they're like they always find something to react to, something to like glare at, and that's always just delicious in this movie.
So they have a couple bits. We go into this room that doesn't have like a way out, and then they go a different way that like keeps shrinking as they keep walking.
Yes.
And they're like, two of the adults are already saying, let's get out of here. They've been there for 30 seconds. And then we get the chocolate room, which is just glorious.
I do want to throw out real quick, the musical bit that he plays on the piano is not Rachmaninoff.
Oh, okay.
I forget now who it is, but it's not Rachmaninoff. The joke is that Mrs. TV is so smug about what it is, and she's actually incorrect. But yes, then we enter into the chocolate room.
The chocolate room, which when the kids came in, when everyone came in, that was actually the first time they all saw it, which is kind of cool. Like
I'd heard that.
You can see that. You can see that, especially the kids' eyes are like, whoa. And it's just such a great example of production design. Not all of that you were able to eat, obviously, but some of it you could, I guess.
Sure. And again, this is where I talk about how like it is, that whole room is fantastical, but at the far end of the wall, you see like the barred windows, so like even the movie is sort of acknowledging the reality of like, yes, this is this incredible, imaginative, wild, fantasy of candy everywhere, but it's inside of a factory. Like, let's never forget that.
Yeah, exactly. And that chocolate river, it always looks so yummy, and you find out it's actually like dirty water with
of course. Yeah. I love that, and again, I think this is one of the ongoing impact of this movie is that you can now, in fact, online order gummy bears that are as big as your head.
Really?
Yes.
So I know for a long time that they were actual like Wonka bars that you could buy. Is that still the case to this day?
There were the original Quaker Oats ones that bombed, and then in the mid-ooze to like 2010-ish, I think Nestle or somebody bought the name and brought back the Wonka chocolate bar, and then those went away. And then there's that Wonka branded line of candy, but none of it's chocolate. It's all like Nerds and Nerds Rope and I forget what else. But they've attempted, God knows, to do that in real life. It hasn't really ever quite hit, but yeah, you can now be like Violet Beauregard and grab a gummy bear that is big as your head and just bury your face right in it.
Yeah, take a couple weeks with it. It'll be a while. And then in that scene, we get the beautiful song "Pure Imagination," sung by Gene Wilder, which is just I feel like that song is what makes that scene so special, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just wonderful. Like his singing voice is great too.
Oh yeah, no. He's a very skilled singer and dancer, and I think it also kind of shows you the side of Wonka that genuinely is into this.
Hmm.
That
Right.
he's not just out to like mess with these people. He really does care about what he does. This world is a reflection of his personality and his desires and his his sort of utopian vision of the world is that you can eat everything you see, that
Yep.
everything in front of you is delicious and sweet and tasty, and it's a lovely number.
And then it
And
makes it. Yeah. Go ahead.
no, I say, and then Lou Rawls did a great cover of it,
Mm.
not long after.
And then Augustus Gloop, naturally, the one who loves to eat, would be the first one to
Of course.
to go. What I love about this, like the screenplay, it's like we meet each of the kids, and then when we get to the factory, each one goes away after every 10, 15 minutes, whatever. It's like Augustus Gloop, is the first to go.
I'm just now getting this after 50 years. They disappear in the order in which they appear in the film.
Oh my God, I've never thought of that. Is that right? Or do we meet
Augustus, then
Violet is. Do we meet Violet
no.
before?
Sorry, no. I got that wrong. Violet gets the ticket third, and Veruca second.
But yeah, otherwise
second and Veruca's third. But yeah, other than those two,
that's so close. You think that's something that maybe Mel Stewart might have thought of, like, what if we introduce them the same way?
Or that might be
flipped a little bit.
It might be the structure of the book, which I haven't read in a while, so I don't remember.
Yeah,
but yeah. Augustus is first in and first out.
Yeah. And I love the mom. She's like, "Go in, save him." And what does he say? He says, "Police, help,
help, police,
help,
murder,
help, police, murder."
Yeah, I'll tell you,
he's like not interested in saving this kid.
I as much as I love the songs and I sing a lot of them myself, but I quote Wonka's non sequiturs all the time. I mean, and those are what have become the memes.
Yeah,
the suspense is terrible. I hope it'll last.
Yeah, that one's classic, right?
Yeah.
And I love they're all just watching him, and he goes up the tube, and he's like, "All right, bye now."
Yes,
like not very concerned.
And now we're introduced to the Oompa Loompas.
The Oompa Loompas. Like, what do we think of the Oompa Loompas in this movie, Alonso?
As a kid, I found them a little disconcerting, but I dug them, and I think they're, yes, you can get to a whole weird colonizer discussion about who are these people and why are they doing all this labor, who's paying them. But I think they're, in the book, I think they're portrayed like as in a much more problematic way.
More problematic.
At least here they're orange and green. We can go with that.
Yeah.
It's funny. There were critics at the time who complained about the text on screen thing because Sesame Street had just launched.
Oh, okay.
Sesame Street debuted in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea of like throwing these lyrics on the screen that way with the stylized animation was seen as, oh, they're just trying to hop on the Sesame Street bandwagon. But for those of us who grew up on Sesame Street anyway, it was just like, oh, okay, more of this. I know what this is. So I always, and as a 4-year-old, I could read. So I felt like I was I know what that means.
I like the Oompa Loompa songs. I feel like you need kind of like a conclusion to each of the 4 kids leaving, and it's like a nice way to do that. And the text is kind of innovative. It's not overdone. Like you get a little bit, but it's so stylized and weird. It's like you can kind of go with it.
Yeah, it is. I think one of the moments where the movie leans into that moment of psychedelia.
Mm-hmm.
But not in a way that feels dated, because I think I think Sesame Street has sort of made that kind of thing a staple of sort of children's entertainment.
Yeah. And one other thing that Julie Don Cole told me about the Oompa Loompa actors, that they love to party.
Oh, I bet.
She said they were having fun. She said, which I thought was an interesting revelation. So then we get to the tunnel scene, right? Which, if you notice, when they get on the boat, there's nowhere for Augustus and his mom to even sit.
I was going to say, along the way, like when they get into the Wonka-mobile, like he knows in advance who's moving forward and who isn't.
Like, how much does he know early on? There's not going to be room.
It is very creepy if you think about that. Yeah. But yeah, already it's just enough room for the survivors.
The tunnel scene.
That tunnel scene freaked me out as a 4-year-old, because not just the light and his sort of maniacal recitation of again, a poem that exists, and now I'd have to look it up,
Mhm.
but that the idea that in a G-rated children's
G
movie
rated.
you could show a like a nightcrawler or a worm going across somebody's face and then behead a chicken.
Yep.
I only in 1971, like the rating system was still pretty new. The G rating didn't quite have the thing of it now where it's just like purely a kiddie movie. Like
Mhm.
What's Up Doc came out, I think
72.
the next
Mhm.
year. That was a rated G movie. Like a G rated film was not, it didn't it neither G nor X had the assumptions that we bring to them now.
Yeah.
Like it was this notion of like these movies existed on a continuum. But yeah,
Yeah, I feel like this would get. Do you think it'd get if it were released today, like a PG-13? I feel like.
I think it was a PG when they brought, because I saw
Okay.
this. It came out for like a week in 1996. For
Okay.
like, they did a 25th anniversary reissue, and it was the same week that some big like Disney cartoon opened. It was like
Mhm.
it was the weekend that Mulan opened or something.
Mhm.
So of course nobody went, but I did. My
Yeah.
husband and I are both huge Wonka fans, so
Yeah.
we went out to the theater to see it. And I think it was PG for that, because like you can't as that Heidi Gardner teen movie critic character on SNL says, you can't do that anymore.
So yeah, and then I think what sells it really too is just Gene Wilder's performance in that scene. I mean, it cuts to a wide shot of him just eyes big going like, "Wah!" And it's like, I mean, it's like terrifying. If you're like under 10 years old, it's like, what's going on here?
But even then, like Charlie and Grandpa Joe are kind of like, okay,
Okay.
we don't get out much, so this is all exciting, whatever it is, and everybody else is just flipping out.
It's the only part that scares Veruca, because at the end she says, I do not want a boat like that.
Yes.
The only thing she doesn't want in the whole movie.
Exactly.
All right. So then we go into, is it the inventing room next after that?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. And so this is where we get more Wonka absurdity, a lot of visual gags of,
Mhm.
like the bicycle that whips cream,
Yep.
and the butterscotch butter gin. And then of course the very weirdly phallic machine that makes everlasting gobstoppers.
Yeah, the everlasting gobstoppers, which looks so like weird. I think that's one they actually did sell for real later on, and they had
Yeah, but they were jawbreakers. They were just round.
Okay, so it didn't
were
actually
weird.
like, okay.
Yeah, no,
It was like, it's not one that I would have wanted to really try.
Well,
this is like chocolate stuff.
Yeah, and weirdly, it's the MacGuffin of this movie, if you think about it, because it is this plot device that ultimately doesn't matter, but it's it's sort of the inciting whatever.
Mhm.
And you watch this movie as an adult, you're like, oh, those are carved out of wood, but. But
Yeah, exactly.
I think they do look unlike any other candy you've ever seen, and yes, assuming that one does not choke on one, the idea is that it lasts forever, which is a neat concept for a candy, but obviously completely fictitious. It's like it's the candy equivalent of the perpetual motion machine.
Yeah, there's just so much great imagination in that scene. I love the little comedy bit of him throwing the shoes in, and he says it needs a little kick.
Yes, but and then, too cold.
Too cold. And then he gets the little piece of gum. What does that take, like 30-40 seconds for that giant contraption to make?
Yes, well, that's after the gobstopper, then we see the thing that's got like bees in it, and punching boxing gloves, kneading dough, and all this crazy stuff. And after all this effort, and again, Walter Scharf score, like the sounds that the gobstopper machine makes and that the gum machine makes are just wonderfully wacky. And there's one of the creepiest shots of Wonka in this movie is during the gum machine going through its paces, where he's like,
oh, that like close, like where it's like through the thing.
Like he's framed by the moving parts of the machine, and they're kind of out of focus, and he's in focus, and he's just staring intently, and you're like, what is going on here? What's he going to do?
He can like see Violet's future.
Yes, it is like Fred Astaire's not doing that close up and having it come out like that. I'll just say that.
Astaire's going to Mel Stewart saying, let's shoot this a different way.
Exactly. Can't I just be winsome? No.
Yeah. So So Violet, it's set up that she loves gum, so it has a
Yes.
nice payoff there. And
Yes.
I don't even think she puts the whole thing in her mouth. She's like takes a little piece of it.
No. She, oh, a good point.
Does she put the whole thing? I always see her going like this, like she just takes a little piece off. Maybe she's saving some for later. I don't know.
I would have to look at that because, yeah, you're right. She does do kind of a weird thing with it, but I mean, she's getting the full effect either way. So, you know,
yeah. I think it's hilarious when she's talking through what she's tasting, and then the light just slowly turns blue. Like yeah. It's not a very, you know, it's not an effect that needed a whole lot of work. You know?
It's a practical. Yeah. Like they didn't have to go in later and CG it. Like, no, they just put a blue light on her face and then they cut away and then they come back and like there's some sort of hydraulic in her jumpsuit that's turning her into a blueberry. You know?
Yeah. Violet, you're turning violet. And we haven't said that actress's name, Denise Nickerson. Who passed away
recently. Yes.
In 2019.
R.I.P.
Yeah. R.I.P.
She was somebody for me who I have various phases of my life with Denise Nickerson because I remember her from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Then when I was a little bit older, The Electric Company debuted on PBS, which I was a huge fan of. And she was a member of, they had a band on the show called the Short Circus. Mm-hmm. And it was all like teenagers and she was one of them. And I remember thinking like, I know that girl's face. I know who that is. Who is that girl? And then years later, it dawned on me who she was. And then years after that, in the mid 70s, she is one of the teen beauty pageants in the brilliant satire Smile from Michael Ritchie, which is actually coming out on Blu-ray later this month. I'm very excited about. If you want to do an episode about it in 2025, let's talk about it. But she's
Smile.
In that. Yeah, Smile, one of my favorite American movies. Anyway, so yeah, I'm a huge fan of hers. I was very sad when she went.
Yeah, so yeah, we miss her. She is the first, I believe, of the 5 kids to die. Right? I think in real life, in real life, the other 4 are still with us.
Yes.
And this is her final moment in the movie. When we cut to the wide shot, now we go beyond just the blue light and we get her, her face is like painted right in blue.
Yes.
And I cannot imagine that was a fun day for her. I imagine that was really trying to be in that, like being rolled around like that.
Yeah, sadly, part of the legend of the film is that the Oompa Loompas weren't very good at steering her. And apparently on one of the takes, her head hit the door jam because they didn't calculate it right. And so, yeah, she's talked about later, like, yeah, I got banged around quite a bit during that last, like exit from the film.
Yeah. And so she's rolled out. We get another Oompa Loompa song. Yes. And I love the thing that Gene Wilder says, like, oh, that's not air, that's juice. They have to release the juice. Yeah. it's like you don't need to see that. It's like the thought you have of what they have to do is way more graphic and horrific.
Yeah, that's the David Cronenberg version.
Oh my God, he would be a great director for this.
For sure.
I just heard he's finally directing another movie after like 6-7 years. I think in the fall he's directing something new. Hopefully, cool. David Cronenberg.
Yeah, but just when he goes, it always goes wrong in the dessert. They all turn into blueberries. It's like, who else? Yeah. What are Oompa Loompas? Who are you experimenting this diabolical gum on?
Yeah, who has he practiced this? Like throughout the many months he's been working on this. I do like the idea of a piece of gum that can be a 3-course meal. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, it would change, the transport of food. Heaven knows, but not if we're all going to turn into blueberries. And what's he going to do with that juice? Like, I don't even want to think about it.
Okay, so now we're down to the 3 kids, and before we get to the iconic final scene with Veruca Salt,
yes,
we go into that space with the bubbles, with the fizzy lifting drinks, and this is the part of the movie where Grandpa Joe and Charlie do the wrong thing, which is not something they were used to doing.
they also break the rules. And that propeller scared me as a kid. And I remember very distinctly when the movie would air on television, they would always cut to commercial right when they're like, the propeller is going, they're like, we're doomed, blah, blah, blah. And then like, bam, cut to commercial, like, oh, that was
the commercial break.
Yes. They had to wait until they come back and see how they save themselves, But that's like, I think even though you can really see the wire work now, if you're looking for it, like I think it taps into a lot of things where it's like, the fantasy of flight is really fun. And then like there's the notion that they save themselves by belching. Like what kid doesn't want to see that in a movie?
Yeah. And that's a scene I believe that Family Guy is spoofed, right? But it's not belching. I'm pretty sure that
I'm inclined to say yes, just because Family Guy's been on so long. They've spoofed Jean Dielman by now,
Yeah. But no, you're right. When Charlie gets up close to the top, it's scary. Like we hear like Grandpa Joe says, you just need to burp and it'll be fine. And he says, I can't. We're gonna be killed. And it's like you see like a close up of it, and it's like, yeah, that's not just like, this is not G-rated family entertainment. When you're like, oh my God, that could have been a different ending to this movie. Charlie would have been the third kid to go, right? Getting chopped up
and not in a way that he could be like, juiced or taken out of the fudge boiler. Like he would have been sent home in a several garbage bags.
If another horror director of the 70s had taken this on, maybe that would have been the
Wes
switch.
Craven's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Right after Last House on the Left. But we haven't really talked about Roald Dahl, who wrote the screenplay to this movie. He after the film came out, he was not happy with it. He kind of disowned the movie. I'm really curious to know exactly what parts of the film he was so against. Was it just that they changed stuff, I guess?
I never know what his deal is. He didn't like the first Witches either, which I thought was great. I mean, then that one they did change the ending.
Okay.
The 1990s The Witches.
With Angelica Houston, which I love.
Yeah, they did change the ending, but whatever, like deal with it, old man. They brought in an uncredited David Seltzer, who said it would write The Omen, to do some stuff, and they tell the story on the DVD about how like the original last line of the film was Wee! Grandpa. Yeah, Grandpa says yippee. Like
yippee.
It's so funny the way Mel Stewart tells the story in the DVD. It's like Grandpa says yippee. And they were like, well, this can't be the ending of the film, and so they David Seltzer had like gone on vacation, like out somewhere where we literally
like in Maine or something, like somewhere in the middle of nowhere
to get to the telephone. It was like Green Acres or whatever. And he just came up with what is now the last line of the film. But yeah, I don't know the specifics of what Dahl's issue with this film was, but like authors can get
I would be curious to read like the initial draft written by Dahl to see like how much is different, what is in. I think Slugworth, the quote unquote villain, was not in Dahl's draft. Like Mel Stewart felt like they needed some sort of like an evil presence throughout the movie. Because if you don't think that Grandpa Joe is the villain,
exactly, you gotta have somebody else.
You gotta have somebody. But and that's when I said I was thinking of the wrong scene. It was supposed to be yippee at the end, but they do say in the fizzy lifting drink scene when they're going up.
Just say we, yes.
Wee! And it's like it is the worst. Like the part where Charlie says we, his mouth is open in a way that he can't possibly be saying we. He's like, his mouth is wide open. I'm
the
like,
magic of ADR.
Not the best ADR of the movie. But they finally land. I mean, how long is that scene? 2 or 3 minutes long? I'm like, what are the others doing?
Good question. How is their absence not noted? What else is going on? Because the rest of the film was very much a group activity. So into the Golden Goose Room, which this is, I think, my favorite song in the movie. This is one I find myself singing all the time. Just cream buns and donuts and fruitcake with donuts, so good you could go nuts. Give it to me now. It's a highlight. And I'm sure Julie Dunn Cole has a lot to say about it, but it is. She kind of walks away with the movie in this part.
Yeah, and watching it again, I'm like, right before I interviewed her, I'm like, this is the only like child actor who gets like a final song, right? I mean, the other ones like Augustus and Violet,
a song at all. I mean, like Charlie gets the one
little bit
early on, but she and I don't know if it's that thing of like she was the one who could sing, or just that's how what Brickus and Newley wrote. But either way,
no, I asked her about it. She said, from the beginning there was always that final song. It wasn't something that was added right at the last minute because they could find out she could sing or anything. It was always just there, part of what she had to prepare for and do. And she recorded the song first, and then she lip syncs it on the day, and just hits it out of the ballpark. It's such a great song. Her delivery of it, I like that it's not cut really, really fast, right? I clocked about 45-second long take of her roaming around the room. She like flips out her hair, and then she does that smile, which is so great.
Yeah.
And it's like a long take of her
Yeah.
lip syncing, and it's fantastic.
Well, that's the thing about older musicals is that they had time to rehearse.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a moment can go on longer. And like you look at those old MGM musicals, like Fred Astaire, Eleanor Powell, these people would do like these long stretches of dancing across a soundstage or, doing whatever it is they're doing. And lately you see a lot more editing, partially because of, what MTV has done to our attention spans,
Mm-hmm.
but partly because they didn't have the rehearsal time to allow the dancers to get that good at doing it, or they don't have
Mm-hmm.
as much time to shoot it as they did in the old days. And so you have to cut it together to
Mm-hmm.
have all these moments that work where no one's flubbing it. And so so I appreciate a longer
Mm-hmm.
cut because it means somebody knew the choreography and could do it, for a stretch of time without messing up. And so we can now put that on film.
Yeah, I just 2 days ago recorded a 20th anniversary bonus episode about Moulin Rouge, which is like the total opposite in terms of the cutting. Like the musical numbers in that movie, it's like boom. I mean, does it last a second?
Sure, but that's Baz Luhrmann's aesthetic too.
Yeah, it's a different aesthetic. It's a different kind of thing. In this movie, I think it makes sense that we stay with her for long periods of the song.
Yeah.
And then she said it was like something crazy, like 30 takes for her to do the part where she like kicks the ball and like and the stuff falls down just in the right way.
Sure.
And then her final shot in the movie, they only did once. She said they only did once. She falls one time onto some boxes, and then there were two people down there to grab her. And the camera just stays on that as we hear her. She was a bad egg.
Another great machine noise in this movie.
And Gene Wilder gets not one but two like great lines there. He says she was a bad egg, and then the dad goes in, and there's gonna be there's gonna be a lot of garbage.
Yeah.
And it's like that, like the shot is done the same way, like both times.
I think that furnace is lit only every other day, so they've got a fighting chance.
Yeah. Oh, before we let go of Roy Kinnear, there's one other part that made me laugh so loud I forgot, is that part where he says, "I can't take much more of this." Like a couple scenes before that, where his eyes are.
All of his reactions are great when Mr. Beauregard asks him what line he's in, and he says nuts.
That's right. That nuts. That's how he's able to manage all of those like hundreds of people looking for the chocolate, like the golden ticket for day after day.
But and that's like there's multiple puns going on here, because you've got salts, nuts, and then you know what a verruca is, right?
No, I don't.
A verruca is like an open wound.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
You use salt in an open wound. That is what verruca salt is.
That blows my mind. I just thought it was just like a name. I mean, I don't. No. That's not a name. That's not a name I've never met anyone named Veruca. But
no, it's a Britishism that we don't know that much here. Like I learned this because somebody said it on Little Britain once. I'm like, wait, what is a Veruca? And then I looked up, like, oh, now I get this joke 20 years later.
Wow, salt on an open wound. That is so interesting.
Yeah, we also, I think Americans have to look up what a bean feast is. That she references in the song, and it's like it's basically just like all sweets and desserts.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a fantastic scene. I believe it's it's squirrels, right, in the book, and that's what that's what Tim Burton did in the remake, because they weren't able to, or remake or reimagining, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to call that thing. But yeah, I think that's the one that Mel Stewart said they just didn't have it in the budget. They weren't able to replicate that scene from the book, so they made it the geese.
And I think they that worked out well. Again, like with the wire work in the fizzy lifting drinks. If you're watching it now as an adult, you look at those geese and you can tell that they're like, it's a trick effect shot, but whatever.
Yeah.
I will say that the less said about the Tim Burton version, the better. But I will say the one thing that I do like about that movie is the Veruca Salt Kiss Off song.
Okay.
That Danny Elfman wrote, because it's very kind of like bubblegum psychedelia. So like that was the one thing I took away out of that movie. It was like, oh, I like the new Veruca Salt song.
Yeah, I saw the Tim Burton film opening night, and I've never seen it again or really thought about it since.
Yeah, me neither. I went to the press screening. I was like, ugh. And then I just tried to.
It's tough. Some of those where I just love the original so much, and you're watching a new version, and it's just like, if it's not landing with you, you kind of want to just forget about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like one of the things that's sort of interesting about this process is that, like, the book is called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yep.
The movie is called Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, but it still focuses on Charlie. Burton's version is called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but it focuses on Wonka.
And Willy. Yeah. Right, because he has Johnny Depp, so he's like, well, let's I guess put him in more of the movie.
Let's give him a backstory because that's something people need,
With Christopher Lee, right? Wasn't Christopher Lee?
Yes, as his father, the dentist. Yeah. Anyway, moving on to Happy.
Back to Happier. So Veruca's out. Hopefully she's okay.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We never find. There's no like card.
There's no epilogue.
Lets us know. He just tells us, they'll all be fine. They'll just be their rotten selves, maybe a little nicer.
Yeah. I always take it as they're all okay. I don't take it as all four of them died.
Sure, you want to trust Willy Wonka at that stage in the film. You go right ahead.
But he did have a long contract, so maybe I don't know.
Yeah, anything is possible with this dude.
All right.
So now we go to the Wonka mobile.
Mm-hmm. The Wonka mobile, which is also like a fun effect of like them getting like
all covered in foam,
covered in foam, and then
the Wonka wash. Yeah.
We can never just go straight from like one scene to to the next room or anything. There's always got to be like a vehicle.
Yeah. Oh, and we missed the lickable wallpaper in there somewhere too.
Oh, right.
There's all these little odd things along the way. And as much as like I get really annoyed with CG movies now because it feels like, well, we can do anything, we can create anything, and it's like, well, then nothing is exciting and nothing is visually interesting because it's all this blob of ones and zeros. And I mean, often the best CG is the stuff that you don't even notice, like when they make San Francisco look like it's 1970 in Zodiac by digitally erasing all the TV antennas or whatever. But but when they give you the horde of orcs or whatever, it's like, whatever, it's CG, I don't care. I love something as goofy and old school as the Wonka wash, where it's literally just like it comes in one side and then out the other, but like there's a weird in between where
it's really odd.
and then again, Walter Scharf making those great sound effects, those like popping weird sounds of it, and it's just like, give me more of that. I like that kind of visual fancy in a movie where I don't have to rack my brain or about where it came from or look for the flaws. Like, I know exactly what you're doing. This is a George Méliès trick basically, and it works. I love it.
Yeah, I think the same shot is done in an old Laurel and Hardy short film from like
probably,
the 30s, like where it's like right in the center of the frame, like they do something across. I think it's in the one called Busybodies. I grew up on Laurel and Hardy with my dad, loved them, and we showed them to me.
Oh, those are great.
That's one of them. But yeah, that's a fun scene. And then we get to the TV scene, which we've set up. Mike TV is is obsessed with television, so that, like the gum thing with Violet, we get kind of a payoff to that. What's your take on that scene in the movie?
Oh yeah, it's a great scene. It totally works with the character. The idea of shooting something into TV is really cool. I love just the stark like surgical whiteness of everything. Like I'm not a Halloween person, but if I could get a white striped jumpsuit with the mask and the Wonka top hat, like that would be my Halloween costume.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And I love how like you're not immediately like, oh, he's going to transport himself, but as soon as that bar comes through and his love of TV, like it's coming, like he's going to do something that and
not do it.
And I feel like that's the one of the four that I'm like, how do they return him back to his normal self? He's like this big.
Young boys are very stretchable, pliable. I forget what it is, but they're just going to put him in the taffy machine.
Just going to go like this.
Sure, Wonka, whatever you say. Everybody's going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I at this point in the movie, we're kind of getting near the end here, and I don't know if I love that scene with Mike TV as much as like some of the other stuff in the factory. I can't even put my finger on why. I mean, I like the kind of the stark white of it, but I feel like almost at this point in the movie, we're down to so few characters. You can kind of feel like, okay, now we're getting to Charlie's big moment. What's going to happen with him? We're kind of waiting for that.
I feel like it's a nice sort of payoff. I like when Mrs. TV faints and has to be carried off. Like I think they're having fun with it. I mean, you could take a larger issue like, are the sins of these children, do they merit the punishment?
Yeah.
Like, okay, fine, he's a glutton, she's like completely selfish and terrible, but she chews gum a lot and he watches television. Like maybe we don't have to destroy their bodies for their for their crimes. I don't know.
Well,
It's
I guess to be fair with Mike, right? He like Wonka does not say, "Okay, let's try it with you, Mike." I mean, he just runs over there.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Everybody does what he tells Augustus not to drink the water. He tells Violet not to put the gum in her mouth. Like, he escapes liability throughout. But nonetheless, I think that the castigation of these children might be a tad overdone.
And I like the cheesy effect of her holding the little doll, like little piece of whatever that is, but then it cuts to a close-up of him like going
yeah, exactly, the giant fingers effect holding him up, and then he's in the purse being swung back and forth. That's
the shot. The shot that really looks awful is that weird shot of the mom's close-up. There's something weird with the color. I don't know what happened.
That's very much like a we're splicing two things together. And...
They're like, we're trying. It's 1971. We're trying.
Yeah, 1971. You go with it.
Yeah. All right, so that takes us to the last little segment of the movie, and there's an expectation. Charlie's the last one standing. So they're expecting like a lifetime supply of chocolate, right? Isn't that kind of like the expectation?
That's the big payoff of this tour. Yeah, like the rest of it was just prelude, and then they get the brush, and they're like, "What's going on?" And Wonka has that great flip out where he totally
classic
reads them to filth for having broken the rules. And I have to admit, as a 4-year-old, I guess I didn't cobble together the plot as well as I could have. I didn't understand what the significance of giving the gobstopper back was. It wasn't until I was a little, I was like, oh, right, because he was gonna, and then they have to, and so like it is a perfect little, again, it's the MacGuffin of the movie, but it's the perfect button to like indicating that Charlie is indeed pure of heart.
Yeah. And once again, we get Grandpa Joe. He's like, he's like, you're a crook, and we're gonna go to that slug. We're gonna give him that ghost. And it's like if Charlie had listened to him, it'd be a different ending.
Exactly.
So Slugworth, I guess, is just like waiting in the wings, hoping that this all pans out.
Exactly. Ta-da!
But yeah, I just think that's what makes this movie so great, is at the ending you really feel the rage from Willy Wonka, and you're just like, oh my God, this is awful. But Charlie still does the right thing, and boy, it pays off big time.
yes. And it all happens so fast, and the movie ends so quickly that you can barely wrap your mind around, wait, so Wonka was actually not this lunatic that we thought the whole time, that this was all a long con. And you just, and then the movie's over, and and so that's one of the things that sort of benefits repeat viewings, is that like you go in now knowing what's going to happen, like okay, looking for but again, Wilder is not ever giving you anything to indicate that like, okay, we're both in on this, but these characters don't know. He is doing it pure. So yeah, it there's a lot to uncover there, but it all, you still buy the payoff,
Yeah, I mean everything that he did to find this kid to take over his factory, it might not have panned out, right? Maybe all 5 of the kids had died. I guess it would have to start over again.
I guess so, but even then it's like watching it now, you're like, oh, okay, wait, so you wanted a child to do things your way. He says that, he goes, well, an adult would want to do things his own way, a child would do things my way. I'm like, so you're basically just looking to install a Dauphin that's going to take over, your factory, and just not give you any lip because they're lucky to be there. I'll give it to the poor kid with the 4 grandparents in one bed. They'll be so grateful. They won't raise a stink about, my child murder schemes.
Does Grandpa Joe help out, or does he go back in bed and just gets fed candy until he dies?
Good question. I would like, all right, old man, you're perpendicular now. Like, grab a broom.
Yeah, mom's going to bed for a few weeks, and you were getting up.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I do think that's important in that final scene to note it's not just Charlie taking over. He is bringing the whole family. I think they needed to like make that clear.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think we would sort of take that as read, but yes, it is nice to have it explicitly stated. And then, yeah, like the because again, this is a storybook and these are storybook characters, they figure out a very organic way to have the very last line of the film be, he lived happily ever after.
The line that David Seltzer thought of just right there on the spot,
hanging on a phone pole in Maine.
Talk about pressure. Like they're on the set, they're waiting Cute.
That's some good writing. But
And yeah,
watch the DVD commentaries if only to hear Mel Stewart say, "I was not going to end the film with Grandpa says yippee."
Grandpa said, yeah, he says it like three. He's like, Grandpa says
Grandpa
yippee.
says
I'm not ending
yippee.
the movie with yippee. And so, yeah, that takes us to the final scene in the Wonka Vader. And
Yeah.
as a kid, I love the idea that you could hit all these buttons and it could take you to every room and you don't know where it's taking you. And there's only one he's never pushed. And it's in like a
Right.
little seal. And you're like, oh, what's that going to do? And it's so fantastic. Like it goes up out of the factory.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going.
Good question. I mean, there is a sequel novel called Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, but
Yeah.
and again, that's another moment where you get the overhead view of the town. Look, there's my school. It's like, this is not America. Like
Yeah.
wherever this village is, this is not the United States. And so,
Yeah.
like, they're very clear about like Veruca's from England, and Augustus is from Germany, and Violet and Mike are from America.
Yep.
Charlie is just very vaguely, he lives near the factory, wherever that is.
Wherever that may be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that last line, I feel like with a different actor, it might have come off as sentimental or just but Gene Wilder sells it, and the way
Absolutely.
he closes his eyes after he hugs Charlie is so genuine.
Yeah.
It cuts to the credits and it's just like, oh, you just such a feel-good ending. I love the ending.
Yeah, and it is this uncharacteristically sweet moment from the Wonka that we've seen for the last 90 minutes, who's just been like a lunatic.
Yeah, it's earned because we don't see a lot of sweetness from him
Exactly.
usually, outside of maybe when he's singing Pure Imagination. And so I feel like all of that nastiness and that kind of, the comedic banter and everything, it sets up that last scene as being just so moving. And I still think it works so beautifully to this day.
Yeah, I think like this is a movie that does have darkness in it, and I think that's one of its more admirable traits, because again, it trusts that kids can take it, but at the same time, it's not cynical, and it ends in a hopeful and positive and upbeat way. So you can go back and forth in tones. Everything doesn't have to just be one thing all the time.
So what do you think about this movie celebrating its 50th anniversary? Like, has any of it aged at all? Like, what do you feel? Do you feel like it's you can hold it up pretty well 50 years on? And
yeah, I think you can show this movie to kids and they'll get it. I mean, like, it is a world without cell phones and the internet, but I mean, I think it again, because it really is telling you so early on that this is a story. This is a storybook. Yeah, I mean, there are a few things like the Martin Bormann joke, the fact that the anchorman is named Stanley Cale because Stanley Kaufman and Pauline Kael were two really powerful film critics at that time. Like, there's little bits like that sure, are very of their moment. But I think generally speaking, like, this movie could have been a lot more 1971 in terms of, the hairstyles or the outfits or whatever, and it kind of rides down the middle. I don't think it ages much.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those timeless films. You could watch it in the 80s or the 2000s or the 2020s, and you're not watching it thinking, oh, this is clearly an early 70s film. I mean, there's some little things here and there, but it really has a timeless quality that I love. And I feel like, we got a Tim Burton version. There's talk of a prequel coming called Wonka. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. The only thing that gives me any hope about that is it's going to be from the guy who directed the two Paddington movies, which I adore.
Oh, right.
But yeah, generally speaking, I'm of the must we? Can we not just come up with something new rather than but sadly, like, this is the age of IP. These new companies come in and they take over, a studio. Like Warner Brothers, as we speak, is in the process of being hot potatoed from AT&T to Discovery. And so whenever the new folks come in, they're like, well, we own all this stuff. Let's do something with this library. We don't have to pay for anything, So yeah, we'll see. I never say never, but the Burton movie did not exactly inspire confidence.
But nothing can take away the power of the original. 50 years on, this is still this is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Like, I love this.
Yeah, me too. And this is absolutely like a movie I would take to a desert island because I can watch it over and over and over again. Like, if I'm on a plane and it is offered to me in the menu, I will just watch it. I can just have it on and be paying varying amounts of attention to it, and it's a nice, comforting, fun experience.
Absolutely. So anything else about the movie we haven't talked about? I mean, I looked up the director's filmography. Not a whole lot of films of his that I'd heard of or seen before, but boy, he nailed this one.
Yeah, I went back and watched If It's Tuesday, This Must Be Belgium, which is a
Okay.
film that is that feels very dated.
Okay.
It's about like Americans on a package tour through Europe, but you can see the sensibility of the sketches, the like here's some quick bits that like set up punchline, boom, onto the next thing, that he would do here in Wonka. But yeah, generally speaking, like that, this is, I think, probably the apex of his narrative career. He was also a documentary filmmaker.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's been such a blast to talk to you about it today, Alonso. We're going to end with our final two segments. The first one's called the Divine Double Feature, where we pick a more modern film that we could pair with this. So we've both watched this movie countless times. Like, if you wanted to put something on after that wasn't just Willy Wonka again on repeat, do you have anything a little bit more modern? Anything that you could think of that would be a good pairing with this?
I do. I'm almost a one-man cult for this movie. Although I did recently do an episode about it on A Film and a Movie, and my co-host Dan was shocked at how much he enjoyed it. So I like to think that I'm going to continue to spread the word here in the hopes that people will like this movie, because it has become kind of a pop culture punchline. And that would be Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, that was a charming film. Yeah.
A really underappreciated movie about children and death. And I think, there should be more of those. I think this movie is just singularly odd in the way that Wonka is. And it's not entirely as successful as Wonka, but I think it has the same sense of kind of visual flair and a sort of fantasy world that's partially grounded in reality, but partially where anything can happen. I think it's a movie that, again, trusts kids to be able to deal with some darkness, but also has just some really lovely moments and some lovely musical moments, and a movie that I really want more people to give a second shot at, or a first shot at, because like I know it was like a joke on Breaking Bad where he's in they hide him in the cabin and there's only 2 DVDs and they're both Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. But I just think it's really great, and I want more people to see it, and it does push a lot of my Wonka buttons.
Yeah, I remember I liked it. I haven't revisited since, but it's got Dustin Hoffman and Natalie Portman, and it does have a lot of like sensibilities of Willy Wonka. I'd like to revisit that again. When did that come out? Like 07, 08? When did that come out?
Yeah, so I think
around there,
9 in that neighborhood. Yeah, and it's on HBO Max.
Oh, cool. I believe Willy Wonka is on HBO Max too. It's Warner Brothers, or no?
One would think that
maybe.
it
should be.
I'll look it up while
maybe they're holding it. Maybe they're holding it to.
I'm sure they're
get us ready for the prequel.
they're making good money on people renting it, probably. So
yeah, exactly.
It is not on HBO Max, but
why?
You can,
I wonder why.
The rights issues are always so weird. I mean, it was originally a Paramount film, and now it's in the Warner Library. I don't even know what that's about.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, you can rent it on Amazon and Apple and YouTube and all the places.
Yeah, you can find it, or you can just do what I did: just buy the DVD or Blu-ray, and then you just have it forever.
Yeah.
I've had the same DVD. I would think it came out in like 97, 98 or very early.
Yeah, I have that one, and then I have the anniversary one that has the commentary with the 5 kids on it. That's really fun.
Okay, so that's the one I have then. So that's like 02, 03. So maybe I did get like the second version that they put out. But I've had it for probably close to 20 years now, because I think the documentary was for the 30th anniversary. So it's like 20 years old, the DVD.
Yeah. And then there's, Mel Stewart has that book, Pure Imagination. It's all about the shoot. That's
just fantastic
too. And I need to read Julie's book. I know she wrote one.
Yeah, she wrote one. She talked about, I was very embarrassed because I was not aware of it. And at the very end, she was like, oh, I also wrote a kind of a memoir about my life and the film Willy Wonka. It's called I Want It Now. And I was like, what? I didn't even know. Like I was researching her career and stuff, and that came as a surprise. So yeah, I've already ordered it. I'm excited to read it.
Oh, good. I've had it on like an online wish list for years. One of these days I just need to take the plunge. What would you pair with Willy Wonka?
I would pair the 1996 Danny DeVito Matilda.
Okay.
I love this movie. I mean, it came out when I was like 11, 12, and I remember seeing it in like an almost empty theater. It came out in like mid-August of 96, and it wasn't super popular. I feel like even today, it's not thought of as maybe one of the very best Roald Dahl adaptations, but I've always really, really enjoyed that film. And not to say that that's a newer film. I mean, it's 25 years old, so it's about halfway between Willy Wonka and now. But again, I'm thinking of other Roald Dahl adaptations that I really enjoy. I think that's my second favorite. I just think it's just a fantastic ensemble cast and a lot of fun, like a lot of dark humor. And
there's definitely a cult for it. Mara Wilson,
Mara Wilson.
and she's very funny. She talks about like that when she went to college, that there were all these kids would show up because they wanted to party with Matilda. uh,
That would
she
make
actually
sense.
she wrote a really fun memoir in the last couple of years as well. That's
Oh,
really good. Called
right.
like Whatever Happened to Me, or I forget. It's
Yeah.
anyway, but she's a great follow on Twitter. I
Yeah.
would recommend her. Yeah, there's a mixed bag of doll adaptations. I like the James and the Giant Peach movie.
Also from
that-
96. Yeah.
yeah, that Henry Selick did. There's actually a Danny the Champion of the World starring with Jeremy
Yeah.
Irons and his actual son playing Danny.
Okay. I've
That was
heard of
made-
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like for British TV maybe, and that one's pretty good.
Mhm.
I love the original The Witches, the remake not so much.
Not so much. That was a huge letdown. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I didn't loathe it the way a lot of people
Yeah.
did, but it's not nearly as cool as the
Yeah.
Nicholas Rogue version.
And then the BFG by Spielberg. Were you a fan of that?
I admired what he was trying to do,
Mhm.
and I really liked the fact that it wasn't like it was one of the few sort of big American movies I feel like I've seen in recent years where you could tell they had thrown out the kind of, Robert McKee, this is how you structure a screenplay and this is where the third act starts and all that nonsense. It felt very much taking its own pace and its own rhythm, and I thought that was kind of fun. And there was a sense of some of the sort of whimsy fantasy of it that kind of worked, but it's a mixed bag.
Yeah. I really love the original Witches too. But yeah, I'd go with like Matilda, and Megorium would also be a fantastic choice if you want to find another film to watch after Willy Wonka. Our final segment is Beyond the Flick, and I thought we would talk about Mr. Gene Wilder. So what are your favorites of his? What did you make of him as an actor in film?
Always, I think really kind of charming and versatile. Obviously, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, that's an amazing kind of 1-2 for any performer.
Yeah.
And then I'm sort of kind of less into, he struck out on his own, and he was a writer, he was a director, he had a lot going on. And those films I'm kind of less in love with. Like, I remember as a kid going to see The World's Greatest Lover, which is sort of his like kind of spoof about sort of silent era, Valentino sort of stuff. And it has its moments. I think a lot of his stuff you can kind of point to, be like, well, this is a fun idea, or this sort of works. But there's, like The Woman in Red is really borderline unwatchable. I think
kind of like The Woman in Red. It's not a great movie, but
yeah, Haunted Honeymoon has its moments. I've never seen Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother. I
don't know that one.
That was, I think, the first film that he directed, and it comes up quite a bit in the Madeline Kahn biography that came out a few years ago.
Right.
And they make it sound like it might be kind of fun, so I need to go back and check that one out. I'm not super in love with his like the the Richard Pryor pairings.
There's like four of them.
Yeah, because Richard Pryor, was one of the writers of Blazing Saddles, and I think they thought about him for the sheriff role, and they wound up casting Cleavon Little. But like, Silver Streak has some moments that don't age well, but I think that's got some good stuff. But like See No Evil, Hear No Evil, and Almost You are just kind of like, y'all are not operating at full speed. But I don't want to slag on Gene Wilder. I think he's a brilliant performer, but I just think that the movies didn't necessarily always know what to do with him, and that I think he didn't necessarily always know what to do when he got to make them himself and write them. The one I would recommend that I like a lot, that is a film that he's in but didn't write or direct, actually came out the year before Willy Wonka, and that's Start the Revolution Without Me.
Okay.
Which is a very funny spin on the Corsican brothers story, basically, with him and Donald Sutherland as the sort of mismatched twins at the French Revolution. It's very funny.
Yeah, I want to watch that. It came out, I believe, in like early part of 70s, so I had not started the podcast yet.
Okay.
And so I somehow missed it when I was looking at 1970 films, but I saw it on when I was talking about Donald Sutherland on an episode a few weeks ago. And I'm like, I should check this one out. It's him and Wilder, and a comedy from 70. It looks pretty funny. So you'd recommend that one?
Yeah.
Cool.
For sure.
Yeah, I don't have any titles that nobody's heard of. I mean, basically, it's the producers, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein, outside of Willy Wonka, if I had to pick a favorite, it'd be Young Frankenstein. I just love that movie. I love the look of it. It's so funny. I'm such a huge fan of the 1930s Universal horror films, and the way Mel Brooks puts that movie together.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's such a loving spoof and a knowing spoof, you
Yeah.
know, and they really sweat the details to get like the lab equipment and the cinematography, like not just that it's in black and white, it's in a specific kind of black and white.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
like yeah, they get everything right, and then they just within that framework of being so true to the look of things, you know, indulge in
Mhm.
just wonderful lunacy, and it's a great
Yeah.
film.
And I just adore Madeline Kahn. Like she's one of my all-time
Yes.
favorites,
Oh
and her
God,
work. And
yes.
you know, it's funny, she got an Oscar nomination for Blazing Saddles. That always
Yeah.
like makes me. I'm like, oh, she got an Oscar nomination for that movie, which came
Huh.
out in like January of 1974.
I know
So
both of those films came out in the same year, which is like I
yeah,
can't think of many other directors that have like two incredible, like the apex of the two greatest films they ever made, like
in
in
one
one
year.
year.
Yeah. And did Gene Wilder ever work again with Mel Brooks after 74? Like I was
Uh,
trying to think about that just now. I can't think of another title that he
they
did.
yeah they did not because I think then after that he
Just high
went out.
anxiety, silent movie, history of the
Yeah,
world.
he
Yeah.
doesn't do any of those. He's writing and directing for himself, and then he's
Yeah.
being in other
Hmm.
people's films.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know if I don't know if there was acrimony there. I don't know if it was just
Hmm.
a thing where they kind of went off in different directions or whatever. But yeah, that was the last time they worked together.
Yeah. But I would agree. I think the best work of his career is from like 67 to 74. I mean, those are all so many classic films. I love his scene in Bonnie and Clyde. He's fantastic in Bonnie
Yes.
and Clyde. So I wouldn't like put Bonnie and Clyde at the top, even though I love that movie, because he's just in it. He's in it just a little bit. But
Right.
he's also a great addition to that movie. All right, so that is we've come to the end, Alonso. This has been such a blast to talk about this movie. I just wanted someone who loved this movie as much as I do for this. It would have been a difficult hour and a half, somebody telling me why Willy Wonka has not aged well and why Grandma
Oh,
Joe is awful and it's a bad movie. That would have been a kind of a tricky conversation.
I think so. Yes.
So
Yeah.
I'd love for you to tell us about your podcast. You know, anything
Oh,
you'd like to promote. I know you have a bunch. You have 4 podcasts, right? Or is
sure.
it 5
Yeah.
now?
Well, it depends on how you want to count them. But
Yeah.
I'm the reviews editor at the Wrap. You can read reviews from me
Mm-hmm.
at thewrap.com.
Yep.
My husband and I, Dave White, do a podcast called Linoleum Knife that we've been doing for more than 10 years now. And then we also have a Patreon where we do a lot of extra shows
Mm-hmm.
about like TV and food and different topics. I have a podcast called Breakfast All Day, which if you ever saw me on a YouTube show called What the Flick that no longer exists, it's
Mm-hmm.
me and the co-host from that show continuing to do film reviews, and then also on our Patreon we do TV recaps. And then I do a show that, as we are recording this, is still called the Untitled Iffy Drea and Alonso Project for Max Fun. But by the time this show posts, I hope we have a new title.
Okay.
So you can look for that. And then also on Mondays, you can catch me on the Deck the Hallmark podcast
Okay.
talking about vintage made for TV non-Hallmark Christmas movies. And the Deck the Hallmark guys and I also have collaborated on a book about Hallmark
Oh,
movies
cool.
called I'll Be Home for Christmas Movies. You can
Mm-hmm.
pre-order it right now wherever you get books, and it'll be out in September. So I'm very psyched about that.
Yeah, and you have 2 other books as well. You have some books for our listeners to find online.
Yes, Have Yourself a Movie Little Christmas, which
Mm-hmm.
is a mostly non with a few exceptions, mostly non-TV movie Christmas movies. And then a book I wrote a gajillion years ago that is well out of print called 101 Must-See Movies for Gay Men,
That's awesome.
which
And
included Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
oh, there you go. And if you haven't listened to it yet, I want to tell our listeners to check out our episode about Scrooge that aired
Yes.
last November, a movie I had never seen before we
fun.
talked about it. And it was such a blast to talk to you about that, and is now going to be a movie I feel like, if not every Christmas, like every couple Christmases, I'm going to watch that version. It's so much
goes
fun.
into the rotation. Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I love listening to your podcast. Just seeing those pictures of the 3 of you for breakfast all day reuniting was so. I mean, it made me kind of emotional because you have been, have had to be distant for the,
Yeah, we'd just been
for what, a year or longer than a year.
14 months. We'd see each other every week zooming, but it was the
Yeah.
first time to be up close and personal. It was a moment
Yeah.
for sure.
And then a film and a movie, which I also love.
That one actually is ending.
No way.
Yes, we haven't announced that publicly yet. Although, again, by the time this episode drops, we will have. Yeah, Dan is going back to teaching this fall, and so he had to cut a few things out of his schedule. So that is one of them that we might still do some special one-off episodes for subscribers to Bramble Jam Plus, which is
cool.
the network that carries like the Hallmark and Film and a Movie and so much other great stuff. But yeah, that one's coming to an end, alas.
Well,
but we did a Willy Wonka episode, if you want to go listen to it, where we talked about the 5,000 fingers of Dr. T.
I haven't heard that one yet. Okay, I have to watch that one. But I was like, you have to do Sunset Boulevard and Mulholland Drive. Those are my two favorite films, and you did it. I was so excited to hear that episode. And you blew my mind, Alonso. You said that in Mulholland Drive, you can see Norma Desmond's car. Yes. I had never noticed that before. Blew my mind.
Oh, good. Well, I'm here to share the knowledge. So.
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of your work, Alonso. This has been such a blast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I always have a blast doing this, and I love that you're talking about movies that are this old, because I feel like people's memories just get shorter and shorter, especially on like film Twitter. The notion that there were movies before The Matrix seemed to have escaped people. So thank you for ringing the bell for the older stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks to you, Alonso. Thanks to all of you for listening. Until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.